In this video, we're going to show you what a grayscale is and some examples of histograms of some images. Grayscale is a range of shades of gray without a bright color. The darkest possible shade is black, which is the total absence of transmitted or reflected light. The lightest possible shade is white, the total transmission or reflection of light at all visible wavelengths. Intermediate shades of gray are represented by equal brightness levels of the three primary colors, red, green, and blue, for transmitted light, or equal amounts of the three primary pigments, cyan, magenta, and yellow, for reflected light. In the case of transmitted light, for example, the image of a computer display, the brightness levels of the red, green, and blue components are each represented as a number from decimal 0 to 2055 or binary 000000 to 111111. For every pixel in a red, green, blue grayscale image, R is equal to G and equal to B. The lightness of the gray is directly proportional to the number representing the brightness levels of the primary colors. Then, black is represented by R equals G equals B equals 0, or R equals G equals B equals 00000 in binary, and white is represented by R equals G equals B equals 2055, or R equals G equals B equals 11111 in binary. Because there are 8 bits in the binary representation of the gray level, this imaging method is called 8-bit grayscale. The digital images we have in RGB format can be represented in different shades of gray. That is, any pixel on RGB format of an image projected onto this vector will give us his gray contribution to a new image we form with all projections of original pixels. In the figure, we show an example of 1 pixel RGB projections and the resulting vector on grayscale. The resultant we get, given the projections of the red, green, and blue colors, can be calculated with the equation we chose, where the variables R, G, and B correspond to its true color value within the data matrix. The histogram shows the total tonal distribution in a digital image. It plots the number of pixels for each tonal value. Looking at the histogram for a specific image, a viewer will be able to judge the entire tonal distribution at a glance. So it helps us analyze and correct the contrast of the image. Technically, the histogram maps luminance, which is defined from the way the human eye perceives the brightness of different colors. Our eyes are most sensitive to green. We see green as being brighter than we see blue or red. Luminance weighs the effect of this to indicate the actual perceived brightness of the image pixels due to the color components. Every pixel in the color or gray image computes to a luminance value between 0 and 2055. The histogram graphs the pixel count of every possible value of luminance or brightness if it helps to think of it that way. Luminance is brightness the same way the human eye sees it, as opposed to absolute brightness. The total tonal range of a pixel's 8-bit tone value is 0 to 2055, where 0 is the blackest black at the left end, and 2055 is the whitest white at the right end. The height of each vertical bar in the histogram simply shows how many image pixels have luminance value of 0 and how many pixels have luminance value 1 and 2 and 3, etc., all the way to 2055 at the right end. The histogram bar chart shows at a glance the relative image tone distribution over the entire range. In the field of computer vision, image histograms can be useful tools for thresholding because the information contained in the graphs is a representation of pixel distribution as a function of tonal variation. Image histograms can be analyzed for peaks and/or valleys. This threshold value can then be used for edge detection, image segmentation, and co-occurrence matrices. Also, we can predict about an image by just looking at its histogram. We can use histograms for brightness or contrast purposes and also to equalize an image. Finally, histogram has wide use in thresholding. This is mostly used in computer vision. This is a picture of Einstein and its histogram is this. The x-axis of the histogram shows the range of pixel values. It has 2056 levels of gray or shades of gray in it. That's why the range of x-axis starts from 0 and ends at 2055, with a gap of 50. Whereas on the y-axis is the count of these intensities. As you can see from the graph, that most of the bars that have high frequency lies in the first half portion, which is the darker portion. That means that the image we have got is darker, and this can be proved from the image too. This image is an example which contains a very broad tonal range, with markers to illustrate what regions in the scene map to brightness levels in the histogram. This coastal scene contains very few midtones, but does have plentiful shadow and highlight regions in the lower left and upper right of the image respectively. This translates into a histogram which has a high pixel count on both the far left and right hand sides. Lighting is often not as extreme as the last example. Conditions of ordinary and even lighting, when combined with a properly exposed subject, will usually produce a histogram which peaks in the center, gradually tapering off into the shadows and highlights. With the exception of the direct sunlight reflecting off the top of the building and off some windows, the whole scene to the right is quite evenly lit. Although most cameras will produce midtone centric histograms when in automatic exposure mode, the distribution of peaks within a histogram also depends on the tonal range of the subject matter. To remember, images where most of the tones occur in the shadows are called low-key, whereas with high-key images most of the tones are in the highlights. A histogram can also describe the amount of contrast. Contrast is a measure of the difference in brightness between light and dark areas in a scene. Broad histograms reflect a scene with significant contrast, whereas narrow histograms reflect less contrast and may appear flat or dull. These can be caused by any combination of subject matter and lighting conditions. Photos taken in the fog will have low contrast, while those taken under strong daylight will have higher contrast. As we can see, contrast can have a significant visual impact on an image by emphasizing texture. Contrast can also vary for different regions within the same image due to both subject matter and lighting. We can partition the previous image of a boat into three separate regions, each with its own distinct histogram. The upper region contains the most contrast of all three because the image is created from light with those not first reflect off the surface of water. This produces diffuse shadows underneath the boat and its ledge, and stronger highlights in the upward facing and directly exposed areas. The middle and bottom regions are produced entirely from diffuse reflected light and thus have lower contrast, similar to if one were taking photographs in the fog. The bottom region has more contrast than the middle, despite the smooth and monotonic blue sky, because it contains a combination of shade and more intense sunlight. Conditions in the bottom region create more pronounced highlights, but it still lacks the deep shadow of the top region. The sum of the histograms in all three regions create the overall histogram.